Good afternoon and welcome to Gwinnett County Public Library's Meet the Author series. I'm Denise Ozier and I'm in charge of adult services for the library system. Today's event is being filmed and you'll be able to see it in probably 3 weeks' time at best on our author speaker page, and then it will go to our YouTube page. So I think you'll enjoy some of the ones that you haven't been able to attend. So today's author is Vanessa Riley for her newest book, Island Queen. But she also has a lot of others coming out. This woman, wow, wait till I read her bio to you. This is a book that she has coming out in July. This one is coming out in, I believe it's September. So she's quite a gal. She is. Don't you be laughing, this is the truth. Wait till you hear. She writes historical fiction, mystery, and romance. And all of her books feature historical figures or events. They are multicultural communities in the storylines and strong sisterhoods. In addition to writing all kinds of books, becoming famous as an author, she holds a doctorate in mechanical engineering and a master's in industrial engineering, and then another master's in management. And in her spare time, not writing books and not working on all of these things she does, she's also the president of the Regency Fiction Writers Association. And I read this book, I loved it, you're going to love it, and I welcome Vanessa Riley to Gwinnett County Public Library.
Thank you, Denise. And I thank the Gwinnett Public Library System. Libraries where I first gained my love of reading, and so anytime we can support our local libraries, please do. And I'm just so pleased to be here to speak to you. My background, yes, I am that nerd girl, right? So academic team, math club, science club, people were, getting their letter jackets. I was bringing home medallions from winning science competitions. But I also wrote a lot when I was young. So please encourage everyone to journal and to write. And particularly now in the age of COVID, we're losing so much. So even now, as you write your memoirs, everyone should write memoirs, write diaries, write journal articles. We are losing so much. Talk to our older neighbors, our family members. There are pieces of generations that are disappearing. And you make my work hard. I dig through archival things. I look at letters, I look at journals. Everyone who's writing in history, who really wants to get a sense of what is going on, we dig through that kind of things. And when it's not left behind, it's hard to find. Women particularly don't leave our works behind. Men do. So we're very grateful that we have Anne Frank's diary. But men write letters, so up to the men, I'll give it up to y'all. Y'all write letters, y'all gossip way more than we do, or at least you're willing to put it in writing. And I'll get to why that's important. But once again, I'm Vanessa Riley. I write historical fiction, historical romance, and historical mystery. I focus on between 1750 to 1830. Now, that might sound random to some folks, but that is the time where you have every part of the world in conflict. You have the Americans want to be free of the British king. You have the French want to be free of their king. You have the Haitians who want to be free of everybody who's trying to colonize them, which picks out the French, the Spanish, the British, and of course those newly found Americans are down there trying to make fun. You have, girl, that's from high school. Okay, looking good too, just get that little shout out. But you have interfaith conflicts. So you have the Frankins versus the Capuchins, which are all Catholic dialects. We all think everybody should get along. Well, apparently not. And then you have the great thing that was very common, rarely mentioned, enslavement. And no one wonders why these people also want their freedom. So it's a time of great conflict, great conquest, and a great desire for freedom. It's a much more diverse world than we have actually pictured. One of the reasons I'm able to tell the stories is because the evidence is there. It's just, do you choose to look at it? Do you choose to focus on it? Do you choose to put it back into the proper context in which it existed? Many know the Toni Morrison quote, "If there's a book that you want to read but it hasn't been written, then you must write it." Then there's Henry Mansell from the Chronicle of Words that says, "What doesn't exist, you have to create yourself. Even a dream can be plucked out of your head and shaped for a purpose." So going back to being that nerd girl, on various themes, I loved history, always loved Western civilization, loved writing about it. But the problem was we get in, at least when I was going to school, my daughter has a little bit, she's here, she gets a little bit more notice of the diversity of history. But when I was going to school, we heard one story. Africans were kings and queens in Africa. Then they were transported in a spaceship and dropped back into America in 1865. There's no other history other than that. No, there's plenty of history. There's plenty of discoveries. And it's not all the enslavement story. That is the other thing, because when you teach little girls and little boys that the only things they can hope for is to be a king or queen in some distant generational time frame, or that you were enslaved and had to be forced into servitude to serve others, that limits your horizons. I would have loved to know about a woman named Dorothy Kirwan Thomas when I was growing up. I was very fortunate to take the path that I have. You've heard the litany of degrees. Once again, nerd girl. I love learning. And I was good at math, and I was good at writing. I won a couple awards when I was in high school. But my mama sat me down one day, and Ms. Louise said, "Baby, you need to pay your bills." It's very rare to see a woman to be able to have a full-time career as a writer. So I went the engineering route, and she was absolutely right. You can pay all your bills by having an engineering degree. So if you have a child with multiple talents, be the practical mom, be the practical father, but let them know that you, at any moment in time, can go back and get those great loves. I think it's, there's a famous painter, she didn't start painting till her 60s. There's just so many different things that can happen if you continue to dream. So I started writing when I had this little girl right here. The doctor had sat me down because it was a difficult pregnancy and told me I couldn't do anything for 4 months. Okay. I don't know, my husband was walking on eggshells. He was happy to be deployed. It was a great time. But he put down the box that I had from high school, and it had one of these stories. And I was like, I know more now. I can do this better. And I rewrote that story about 125 times, and that became my very first book, Madeline's Protector. And it was historical because I love history. But in that book, the people of color, I actually took out. I got a horrible letter when I queried to an agent who said I couldn't write, I work with people like you, you never get it. I mean, every one of the things you want to, in the horror stories, this agent said this. So I was now determined to make sure I could write and I could get published. So I did things in that first book, making the only piece of color in that book was the heroine had Spanish heritage, so that would explain her darker skin. So I did that to myself. And I got that book published. It was my very first book, Madeline's Protector. It was published. And as I started writing more, I got an agent, and she would send my books out. But I told her, I wanted to write my stories, the ones that are burning in my soul. And so I started writing women of color that I knew, that I'd researched, that had agency, and I put them in these books. And she'd send these, send her packages out, and we got some of the best rejection letters I've ever seen. We love her voice. Does she have anything else? Oh, we love this story. Does she have anything else? Because they were smart enough and understood the law enough that you really couldn't say, hey, could you just take all the color out like you did in that first book and then, this will be good. But you have to, when you're given a gift, when you're given a passion, you have to live true to that. And I have friends who write to market all the time, and I say, Lord, bless these people. They will, 1 week is werewolves, the next week is, vampires, then they're writing Civil War. They do everything, and they're making money, and that's good for them. I applaud that. That was never me. I had a vision, I had a dream of telling these stories, this history that I loved and started doing more and more research on, because the access is now easier. So many things are now archived online. So many now libraries have the papers, and they're allowing the public to go and take a look at these things. So these stories are crying out for us to write, but somebody has to be brave enough to write them. And so my agent and I, my very first agent, we had a discussion, and I was like, look, these are the stories I want to write, and I know you tried your best. Let me do independent publishing, and we'll see what happens. So I published a book called The Bargain. And I would say I kind of whooshed out because it was a novella, right? Because I was like, okay, if it bombs, and I didn't spend all my life writing this book. So I did it, but I spent money on the cover and all these sorts of things. And with no advertisement, just putting it out in the world, a couple tweets, it sold 1,000 copies in 1 week. People were hungry for this. So this really began my career. And I started doing writing books, and people, are starting to, every author will email the first time they get an email, I got a letter from somebody. Somebody read my book. It was so exciting. But then traditional publishing starts knocking on the door. Say, hey, Vanessa, we really like your voice. Do you have a story for us? But this time they're now open because they see that there is a market, that they can capitalize on telling these different types of stories. And with Entangled Publishing, this is the first time my books are being picked up by NPR. They're being picked up by Washington Post. And these are a breath of fresh air because I've taken this Regency that, there's a version of Regency. Georgette Hare is a wonderful writer. But Georgette Hare wrote that's almost become a lexicon of what the Regency was like. At times, it reflected her own politics because some of the books are actually anti-Semitic. It don't reflect what was really going on in the Regency world. There are much more diverse, less anti-Semitic. There was some there's always prejudice, no matter what time frame there's always prejudice. But there's always people that are of like minds that get together to do great things. And so those types of stories need to be told. So with Entangled, and now more publishers are starting to knock on that door, and I sell this crazy series called Rogues and Remarkable Women, with great titles such as A Duke, the Lady, and a Baby. An Earl, the Girl, and a Toddler, and what will be coming out next Tuesday. I had to get this right, so I have to look. A Duke, the Spy, and Artisan Ally. And this is nothing more than a mashup of First Wives Clubs meets 3 Men and a Baby. Set in the Regency, right? It's fun, it's exciting, but these stories that people never thought would go anywhere are now being translated in Romanian, in Hungary, in French, in true actual English, because the UK is carrying them. And a bunch of Portuguese. And so when you have a dream, pursue it. when you're passionate about something, work as hard as you can. I told you I wrote that thing 125 times. I didn't tell you about all of the classes I took. I have a billion degrees. I took more classes. You always have, I continue every year to do retreats, to invest in my career because it is your passion. You have to nurture it. Writing every day is a thing, and we'll talk about that. But I went to a conference, the Historical Novel Society, or backing up. So we're getting all this press, this pub, but people are saying this is fantasy. You know, we've watched Pride and Prejudice, the 1998 version, 20 times, and I didn't see no black people in there. What they don't realize is that scene where Darcy, the gorgeous, what is that guy's name? Y'all know who I'm talking about, Colin Firth. So Colin Firth, he's looking for Lydia and Wickham. He's sweating, right, in his cravat and his tie. And a little boy comes out and gives him a tankard of ale so that he can keep going. And on that street, you don't see anybody of color. That particular street, you should have seen at least one because of where it was shot. Because there are distinct districts within the London proper that had people of color, neighborhoods of color, communities of color, that particular street. So I began doing this research to prove, I was like, okay, I can't be crazy. I know I know that there are these stories out here. So I started doing this research and I come across a sketch of Prince William Henry, and he's lovingly embracing a black woman in a hammock. Now, some people would say the guy Gilroy, the artist who did this is just, you know, political attack on the royalty, which was common, right? But I had just finished reading Sanditon, which is Jane Austen's very last book, and the wealthiest woman in Sanditon is a black woman, a mulatto woman from the West Indies. If you're familiar with Jane Austen, she takes real people, changes the names, and puts them in her book. Mr. Darcy is a real person, or was a real person. He probably dead by now, but he was a real person. Jane's brother was a famous abolitionist, literally commanding boats to intercede slave ships and to rescue people. Her father, on the other hand, was an administrator to a friend's estate, his best friend's estate, plantations in Antigua. Many people with mixed race children would send them to England, Scotland, and Ireland for education. So it's more than likely she met Miss Lamb. So I was searching for Miss Lamb. So once again, I see this sketch, and the guy who draws it is named Gilroy. Gilroy is an ist. He's sexist. He's misogynist. You just fill in all the blank or any other ist you come up with. That's your boy Gilroy. And so when he draws women, oh, he wants us to look homely, stupid, just horrible. When he draws black women, oh, he does not hold back from any racial stereotype you could think of. Big noses, ignorant language. There was one that says, Massa look kind of cute. But in this cartoon, the woman is drawn beautifully. So she's not the joke of the piece, she's the tattle. This is what your prince is doing in the West Indies. So, like every good researcher, scholar, I followed the rich man. So Prince William, you find out from history, the sailor king, future King William IV, he's commanding frigates during this time frame. And he and his boys are going to literally every island and partying in the brothels. They break a brothel so bad they got to pay for it the next day. And there's a quote of the woman who owned it, is like, let him do it. He's the son of a king. What am I going to do? He's the son of a king. And literally he has to pay the next day. But when he gets to the island of Dominica, his friends are writing letters back. He's with that woman again. She's a handsome woman, that Dorothy. And then I finally get somebody says, he's dancing with Dorothy Kerwin at the Mulatto Ball. So I had a name, and when I started researching it, I fell off my chair. I couldn't believe the things this woman had done. And I said, in my ignorance, I got proof, see? I got a name. Y'all come at me now in these reviews, okay? I got a name, I'm set, right? But I go to this conference, because I'm doing this more research, and then you start getting mad. It's like, why doesn't, I went through some great links, and all by the hand of God to find all these different things. Why don't we know about this woman? What's going on here? I go to the Historical Novel Society, and at this point, I really want to write about her, but I think no one's going to buy this book. No one's going to do, especially with my history in traditional publishing, they're not going to want to singularly focus a narrative on a Black woman. So this is how you almost lose your blessings. I go to this conference, anybody knows, when you go to a conference, you spend millions of dollars to go to these conferences. You had to pay $25 to speak to an editor. And I was like, that's outrageous. I've already spent $5 million to come to this conference. Why must I pay? And my friend was like, look, you spent $5 million to come to this conference. What's another 25? Okay, fine. So I sit down, I'm with Rachel Kahn of William Morrow. And I tell her this story, but in my own head, I'm already couching the story. Well, we could tell about Prince William and his mistress. She's like, we got enough books about him. Okay, then. We can do the two Dorothys, because Prince William had a mistress in England called Dorothea Bland. And we have Dorothy Kerwin Thomas. She's like, yeah, we got enough about her. I want to hear about her. And so I told the full story, and she bought the book at the table. I had to walk out and call my agent and be like, I don't think I sold my child, but this is what happened at the table. She was looking for a story that was different, that pieces together the Regency history that we all know about and this colonial history in the islands. So being at the right place, the right time, knowing the information that you know, being prepared. There's just a saying about being in season. Being prepared is so important. But the bigger picture is invest in yourself. $25 almost cost me being here today. When you find those pearls, let someone else tell you no. Don't tell yourself no in your head, because I was telling myself no. Because I was saying it wasn't worth going because she's going to say no anyway. They're only expecting historical romances from me. They're not expecting a historical fiction. I was telling myself no. So anytime you are with young people, I really want young people to write. We're living in such crazy times. They need to get their stories out. We need to get our stories out. So it's not too late. Everybody pick up a pen and a pencil and a journal. It is never too late to tell your stories. But she buys this book, and I'm able to tell Dorothy's story. Dorothy begins her life enslaved in Montserrat. First of all, Montserrat is the most Irish Black place in the world. That shocked me because I didn't understand that the Irish also played a role in enslavement. The plantations there, people still speak Irish there. They speak a lot of Gaelic in there. Names are, so I was finding Rileys, and I was like, we from South Carolina. You're in Montserrat. It's so fascinating. But Dorothy is the son of the Massa, or she's a daughter of the Massa. So she has certain privileges. She's able to go to town. Now here's how enslavement is different than they had days off. It was very harsh and cruel, but they actually had days off. And I must couch that, depending upon who colonized you. The Irish rules were different than the Dutch rules, which are different than the French rules, which are different than the Spanish rules. And every one of these islands, the ways that you became free are different. The documentations that are required, everything is different based on who colonized the islands. So Dorothy understands bits of the world from her father's perspective. He was a mercantilist, so he's taking goods from one island, selling it to another to make money. He just wasn't good at it, but she understood from a very early age about how to make money. So as she continues on, she is able to buy her freedom and that of her family because she has made money. She literally has businesses across the islands, from Dominica to Grenada to Demerara, which is present-day Guyana. Dorothy was exposed to things so that one of her founding businesses is housekeeping. So when the military comes into these different colonies, as they often did, they would not have slaves. What they would do is they would hire a housekeeper who would take care of the typical housekeeping. But depending upon, especially in Grenada, there are bugs. Bugs that go in the wrong places. You really need to be nice to somebody to be able to get some of these bugs out. So that's why you get these extra complicated relationships in the islands that you don't necessarily see in other places, because there's a trust when somebody has to take some tweezers and pull bugs that gone in the wrong places. Literally. Chiggers, we call them something in South Carolina. Chiggers have a whole new meaning when you go into Grenada. But there are differences, and people literally had what they called their island family and then their families back home. And they would leave the women with money for the children, deeds to property and whatnot. So there was a group of women that were beginning to become, have more economic power than other women in these particular islands. But Dorothy made her money. A lot of many women, because you're going to do what you need to do to become free and to get your children free. The birth rates in the West Indies is lower for enslaved women than in the Americas. One could look at it as the weather, it's harsher climate. One could look at these bugs, because these bugs can do damage to you. But you can also look at it as choices. They had more access to herbs, and herbs to reduce their fertility as well as to terminate early pregnancies, because the fear of bringing another child into this horrid system. That was one of the challenges of the book. I wanted to make sure that even though Dorothy is a success, and she's not the only one who made a success of her life, that we do not lose fact that enslavement is a horrible thing. Writing this book, there was freedom, because I was able to tell her story. And I wanted to make sure Dorothy does heroic things. She's not necessarily a hero. She does save generational wealth for women of color in Demerara. Men became very fearful of women of color having money, even though they would turn around to these same women and say, oh, we've got delegates coming in from other islands or from the UK. Will you handle all the arrangements? So Dorothy was over the sit-down dinner. One of her other friends was over the ball that was given for when these ambassadors are coming. So these women are known for their class, their elegance, and to throw great parties. So everything that one's perspective of what women of color were able to do, it's completely been fabricated or eliminated or erased. You use whatever word you want to do. So when I stand here, and I am so proud to be able to represent Dorothy's life, give you the good, the bad, the ugly, the victorious. I'm also sad that it took all these years for someone to spotlight her. She was famous during her day. Her will is archived in the UK. They don't do that for just anybody. The letters being written back and forth have her name in it. There's one letter, they say, I saw Doll Thomas in Glasgow, Scotland, with her 18 grandkids. First of all, Demerara is Guyana. This is below the equator. So she got on a boat. Most of us struggle going to Walmart with 2 in the back seat. She put 18 of these in a boat. Travel, it's almost a 30 to 40 to some, depending on the season, 60-day journey on a boat to get them to Glasgow, Scotland. She was there to drop 2 of her grandsons into one of the schools there, and then was going to make the journey to London to put one of her granddaughters into school there, as well as one of her daughters. She wanted her kids and her kids' kids to see this world that was opened up because she got access to money. Dorothy's a lot of things. In this book, you're going to, like I said, you'll see the good, the bad, the ugly. You're going to see a woman who was about her family, a woman that would do and sacrifice for that. You're also going to see a woman that was vulnerable, that fearful of being re-enslaved. From everything I read about her, I think that's a fear that she always carried with her. When I read about Grenada, how they could stop a woman of color, a man of color, a black man, a black woman on the street and demand that they show proof that they were a free person. You had between 2 and 3 weeks to prove it while you sat in jail. If you were born on another island, can you imagine? This is not like I'm gonna just, FedEx it. There was no FedEx. And you better have money, because to send somebody on an island to go get a document and then to come back in this time frame. So what would happen is you would be re-enslaved. The jail system would sell you off. One of the great rebellions, the Fidan rebellions, happened because his wife, Fidan's wife, was actually was jailed. And a doctor named Dr. Hay knew his family, knew their story. He vouched for her. So she was released after 2 weeks. A couple years later, there's the Fidan rebellion. They killed a lot, the Fidans, they killed a lot of people. They spared Dr. Hay. There is so many, but once again, why aren't these in our history books? Why don't we see these women? Because Fidan's wife is amazing. That might be a future book of her. She was a fighter, the way that she galvanized the troops, the way that she kept people together. And sat there and rotted in jail. And these aren't nice jails. These are not like, they don't have those laws like we got right now for jails of television and all these different things in the jail. No, these are rat-infested, nasty things, jails that this woman suffered through, made it out, and then helped plot a rebellion about 4 or 5 years later. The world is littered with these stories, and we have to be brave enough to tell them. And we're at a point now, there's independent publishing, but traditional publishing is looking. And so by you guys coming out and supporting these, this is saying, hey, we want to know this history too. There's a lot of fear nowadays about learning about the past. The thing is, you have no control over what happened in the past. You weren't alive, you didn't vote for it. It is what it is. I heard a story recently that there's a project where all over the country, wherever there's a lynching site, they get the dirt and they put it in a museum. And this woman was in, I think it was Alabama. And she's afraid. And first of all, I don't know why you would go in the evening in Alabama to dig and some property to get some dirt. That just sounds like you're asking for it. But she's doing this, and this pickup truck comes past her, stops, comes back up. This big, burly Caucasian man comes out, and he's like, "What are you doing?" She's like, "I'm just getting some dirt." This lynching project, and yet she's almost in tears and everything. And he's like, "Can I help you with it?" And she was like, "Yeah." So he gets on the dirt, and he helps her dig the dirt up, and she notices he's crying. And she asks him, what's wrong? And he says, my great-great-grandfather might have been responsible, or might have been one of the people in the lynching. And then they go together with this jar, and they go and they put it together in a museum. It's a healing moment knowing about history. We have to know about it, because I firmly believe that young girls and boys grow up better when they know that there's all kind of possibilities, that we've all survived something hard and horrible. Our parents have done it. Our grandparents have done it. We can do it. So I'm a big advocate of history, and I write a lot. And I'm very thankful. My books are, I think I have about 21 of them now. I say they're old enough to drink. So Island Queen is what we're here today celebrating. Next week, the 3rd book in the historical romance comes out. But then this summer, you guys are going to see Sister Mother Warrior. It's my sophomore historical fiction. This is about the 2 women who shaped the Haitian Revolution. So Grand Toya, Abadoya Toya, is a Dahomey warrior. I believe she was one of the gals, one of the women that protected the king. She gets enslaved and put in a colony called Santo Domingue. Santo Domingue is Histolia, present-day Haiti and Santo Domingue. Thank you. And she's there, and she ends up caring for a young man whom she teaches battle strategy and all these different things, astrology, that she learned because of being a Dahomey warrior. His name is Jean-Jacques Dessalines. For those who don't know that name, he is the man who literally marshaled the troops and freed Haiti from French powers. He is looked at now as one of the military geniuses of the time. Then there's a woman called Mary Claire Bonheur. Mary Claire Bonheur, I believe, was the first battlefield nurse. She's a famous, in the middle of the Haitian War, where she is leading women on mule trains. And they literally both sides stop fighting. Now, first of all, I would not do that. The fact that they would actually, both sides stop fighting just so the women, not me. That's some bravery right there. But they stop, and the women start bandaging. They don't care what side the people are on. They are bandaging up the wounds. They are feeding people, because what happens is often these blockades. So people are starving. They are feeding people. Mary Claire Bonheur is Jean-Jacques Dessalines' wife. So you have these two women, peace and power, on both sides of the man who won the revolution. And you're finally going to see from their eyes. Because this is another case of, for Grand Toria, there's a book, it's a children's book written about her. Mary Claire, I've seen paragraphs here, there, and everywhere. But there's evidence if you put them all together to create something. So you're going to meet them in Sister Mother Warrior. And then often when I'm writing, I come up with I find these little vignettes that are interesting, but they don't fit a book. So when I found out that every abolition movement in the world stopped when the Haitian Revolution was, when Haiti won, I was like, I got to put that in a book. Because, we all know about Wilberforce and all these champions of the abolition movement, particularly in the UK. They all stopped because of the fear. We were good with y'all being free, but now y'all want to run stuff? I don't know about that, right? So I use that little vignette, and that's the backdrop of my first historical mystery. You're going to meet Lady Worthing. She's a woman of color. She's got Haitian, she has Jamaican, and she has Scottish backgrounds, complicated, crazy family, and she's trying to solve mysteries, as well as trying to help get the abolition movement restarted. So you come for the stories for a Vanessa Riley book, you leave with a little bit of history. I think we're done. I want to say thank you guys so much for coming out. I'm loving what I'm doing. This is a dream I couldn't imagine. And the more I can give you guys stories that make you think about the world in a little bit better place, more hopeful place, those are the stories I want to write for you. And I just so appreciate it.
How do you fit the engineering into your life?
Exactly. Yes. So I had a boutique firm for a number of years, and I've got people doing things for me now. So I'm your glorified signer. Oh, you want me to sign something? Okay, cool. Yeah. But engineering always made me ask how and why. How does this system work? How was it made? Why would they do it this way? And so that you can see it, like I have to self-edit myself. So if you get ever, like 3 or 4 paragraphs about the inner workings of a mill grist, okay, that was me going a little bit to the left. We edit those pieces out. Y'all get 1 sentence. It takes 2 weeks of research. Y'all get 1 sentence in a book. But the power of asking these questions have always driven me. So I'm the one searching through the archives. I'm looking through historical records. I'm finding those nuggets, particularly of women who have not been given their due. Women do such fascinating things. And this is the other thing. If anybody ever tells you, no, they didn't, that would never Just drop those from your vocabulary. Yes, they did. Nobody talked about it. Of course they did. You just haven't found it yet. And my favorite, yes, they were, but they just didn't include them in the family picture.
Didn't I hear some really great news that this book is going to be a television show or a movie?
Yes, so Island Queen has been optioned by Longboat Pictures. So when we there's a thing called an announcement when the book is being written, right? And it's a cute little paragraph talking about stuff. 8 different companies the next day wanted, bombarded my agent. It was like, we wanted it. There was no book. I didn't expect this book to get sold, so of course I hadn't written it, et cetera, et cetera. So we just took names at that point. And in about 4 months later, the book was done, so we started sending it out. And Longboat Pictures out of the UK was very interested. Longboat Pictures is a great company because Victoria Fee did Victoria. They do a lot of public television things. And then the other partner is Julianne Robinson, who you might have heard from something called Bridgerton on Netflix, right? And then Adjoa Andoh read the book. So if you're into audiobooks, she does a full performance. It is an amazing work. But she read it. Lady Dansbury read this. She loved it, so she's also an executive producer. But Sony Productions has now joined the pot too. So I would expect by the end of the year, we're going to hear some great things. We just, they got to finish the script, network. But the initial thought was it'll be like The Crown, where you have several different Dorothys, different ages, et cetera, et cetera. So tell your actress friends out there, there's going to be parts. Any more questions?
How do you find time for all this?
Okay, there's something called sleep that I hear is an important thing. I write so first of all, every writer, I write every single day. Writing is a muscle. So when you skip a day, you're telling your muscle and your brain it's not important. And so you're going to allow other things to take place. So I write even if it's only 50 words, it adds up. It adds up. Everything adds up, but it keeps your brain saying, I'm a writer, I'm going to write. And you have to prioritize it. Life is busy, messy, things are going on. You have to keep moving forward. And if it's important to you, and I believe all of our stories are important. And I think this has never been a more hopeful time period where all stories matter. All stories are getting access. Write every day, keep it moving. And so I love the night owl, everybody's asleep. And so I'll write throughout the night sometimes.
Would you consider writing her story as a biography?
There are still so many pieces that are missing that I filled in the gap. It would take a lot more effort. We're in the United States. Everything is great because many things have been digitized. They're still in the process of digitizing in some of the islands, and then things have been lost. Like in Haiti, every time there's a natural disaster, those archives are getting lost. Or the French took them. Because they did. They took a whole bunch of papers when they left. They took it, and they're actually archived that's another trip down the road. I'm going to hit the archives. But yeah, it would take a long time. And I've given enough room so that someone who is very practiced should be able to put the pieces together. But she deserves it. She deserves that level of books. Any more?
Do you have any creative options on the movie or the series?
So when you, as an author, you always know your lane, right? Because I've had friends who messed up deals because they began to think that they were a director. No, no. You sign on the dotted line, you're giving away creative freedom. But I am a consultant on the film. So, you know, and they have, one of the reasons I love Victoria and Julianne and Adjoa is the writer's room is going to be diverse. They made some really strong efforts to get a showrunner of color. Because it's important. It's important that the people in the room have the power to vocalize what's going on. Adjoa told me some stories, which I'm not sure I'm at liberty to tell. So let me back that up. But basically, the actors, they have the power to influence script. And so several episodes in particular on Bridgerton, because all the actors of color got together and said, we need to address this. And you want that kind of team working on it. But when but you always have to be realistic. When you are optioning the book, you are taking your hands off. I have friends who write the screenplay, and then they shop that. That's not my talent. You got to know your lane, right? So you have source material. You know the story, cohesive story. You can tell it the best way. But that's one of those things. By releasing control, I'm giving this project the most amount of freedom that they can do so that their resources can be activated. Because I think once these stories get on the main screen, that's how more lives are changed. That's how more images and perceptions are changed, because we're a visual society. We learn by what we see on television, good or bad. And now TikTok, what we see on TikTok.
But to that point, I do hope that they go authentic. I am from Guyana, South America.
Yes.
Born in the county of Demerara. So, but it's really important because, you know, they're telling my story, my history.
Yes.
And when they tell it wrong,
Yes.
right, you cannot appreciate the rest of the movie because you're like, but that is not Guyana.
No, that is important. I misunderstood your question. That is important. No, they have to tell it right. The woman on the team now is from St. Martin's. And so she was weeping because she speaks Dutch, she speaks all the various languages. This is a very important project to them. So I feel very encouraged. I also was like, come on now, come on, can y'all hurry up? Because I want to see this. But because it's my book and my name and my brand, there are certain things that I'm expecting, right? And that's why, once again, I'll be a consultant on the film, but we're going to tell the story as faithfully as possible. As well as we talked about designers from Guyana. We talked about empowering people from the various colonies or various islands that were going to be that are involved, trying to get them on staff. So yeah, no, that's important, because you don't want to. Here's Island Queen, and wait a minute, I didn't read that. It's very important, and things get lost but from everything I have seen, I'm extremely encouraged. But it's something to hold accountable. Anyone else?
We have a door prize, if you would just.
Oh.
say your name. Thank you, and you can take a seat.
Okay.
Victoria, and if you just go up to the back table and get your ID back. Thank you. Sure.
Well, that was wonderful, and I did want to add, take a look at our YouTube channel. We did a very excellent program a little while ago on the hanging of and the life of Charles Hale, who was killed here in Gwinnett. So you may want to follow the life of Charles Hale. So you'll find that on the library's YouTube channel to learn more about our unpleasant history. We want to thank Eagle Eye Bookshop that came out today and still have books for sale. They'd make great Mother's Day presents, and of course, she'll autograph them. Mother's Day will be here before you know it. Doug and Diana would absolutely be happy to pre-order for you the upcoming book, the one that's out in July. You can place an order with them, and they will take care of that for you and ship it to you. We want to thank TV Gwinnett and our camera crew, Rob and George. And I want to remind you, you're going to love this book. I can tell you that from firsthand knowledge. And you may want to join us on Tuesday, June 21 at 7 o'clock when the Atlanta Reads Virtual Book Club will discuss this book. We'll be talking about it. So you're all welcome for that. Again, thank you to Eagle Eye Bookshop. And thank you, of course, to Vanessa. She was wonderful. Come on up and meet her.